Day filled vertical rectangle 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 arid mountains, spirit dimension. About 11 kilometers north of where the night-evered spirit tree grew, the nearest kingdom of the wind spirits, Sipits, was located. It should have been a beautiful land maintained by the nature-loving creatures that inhabited it. It was an almost imaginary place, filled with peals of laughter from the lively sylphs and their usual playful antics. Of course, none of those characteristics remained its current repulsive visage. A continuously pulsating mass of flesh covered the already dried-up kingdom. The only things that kept the trees upright were the tentacles of that enormous expanse of flesh that spiraled around the trunks extending to the ground. Like its main body, the spiraled fleshy appendages continued to pulsate in a manner that made it look like it was sucking something from the earth. Without needing to think or observe, it was evident that the kingdom of sylphs faced its destruction. This scene of their kind wandering and buzzing about as mindless infected broke Amihan and Malaya's hearts. In the mortal world, although there were quite a number of them, it was remarkably hard to meet another of their race. It was even more particular to Amihan and Malaya, who were both born in the mortal world. They thought that they would meet more of their kind this time, only to face total disappointment. "Pephile," Mark called out as he patted Amihan's head, who sat on his shoulder. "Do you know how many is the population of sylphs there?" Mark and his team were currently observing the scene from their initial position after seeing the remains of the Sylph Kingdom. There was no need to move any closer as they could see the situation on the next mountain. It was not hard to see the more than 200-meter wide carpet of pulsating flesh from their position. Furthermore, trying to go closer could spell disaster once the infected sylphs roaming their former kingdom spotted them. Just imagine humans trying to approach a killer bee nest of that size and getting chased by an unclear number of 6-inch killer bees. Not to mention that all of them would be hurling wind magic at him. That was suicide. There was no doubt about it. Mark could protect himself in that circumstance, but it would be hard to keep everyone in check. Using miasma would also risk causing mutations if used frequently, as it could contaminate the dimension filled with magical energy in the air. Use photokinesis to hide. That was even worse. More than sounds, the infected folklore creatures, and even animals in this dimension were highly sensitive to magical fluctuations. To cover his whole team with optical camouflage, Mark would need to use an enormous amount of energy from the crystal and cause a disturbance that was enough to alert the infected in a mile or two radius. That was why Mark asked Pephile that question. He needed some information to decide on what to do first. Pephile looked at Mark and shook his head. "I can't answer that, even if I want to. We're different from humans that monitor numbers and populations of other races or groups. It is enough for us to know how many individuals we had in our group and did not care much about others. That is the work of the ones in the rule, like the king, tribe leader, and their trusted men." "So, you don't know?" "Yeah, I don't. Sorry." Pephile shrugged his shoulders. He wanted to be of help as he was also disappointed in the scene before him. However, the question was beyond his knowledge to answer. Then, Mark turned to Terimelio and Felinia, who looked pale as they thought about something. "How about you two? Do you know?" Everyone looked at Mark as they could not comprehend as to why he would ask the two. "Boss, why would you ask husband and big sister Felinia?" The second wife, Dithlia, asked. Pephile did not know. Why would they? The other wives, except for Felinia, also had the same notion. They could not understand the reason why. That was when Mark dropped a bomb that even Terimelio and Felinia went agape. "Don't look at me like that." Mark shrugged. Pephile said that only those in the ruling would know this information. "I just thought that they would know since they're both royals." All the wives of Terimelio were shocked. None of them knew where Mark could have gotten such information. When they looked at the two in question, however, they started to have doubts. Both Terimelio and Felinia both looked like a couple caught in the act of adultery. Of course, it was not like it applied to them. "How did you?" That was what all Terimelio could voice.
Both him and Felinia did not know what reaction or reply they should give out. Torimelio might have a flowery mouth, but outside of being dandy and romantic, he was not much of a con man and a liar. It was more so for Felinia, who was also as pure as a child in many things. And thus, the two were not able to deny it. Well, it's not hard to realize if you know the stereotypes. Not only me but some of us, like Mayor and Mizuki, also noticed how you two behaved differently from the others. You two are more refined, formal, and you two have an aura of superiority over others. The more Mark said, the more both Torimelio and Felinia shrunk. Then Mark said the main reason. You two don't know, but I have someone who can hear everything happening at the base when necessary. You two talking secretly about royal stuff and calling your parents king and queen did not help. The other wives of Torimelio looked at the two in realization. They did not suspect anything at all. So, that was the reason why both of them looked very worried when Mark told them what was happening in this dimension. Although they were not angry, they felt dejected. The two should have told them about it. Go on with the drama later. Mark interrupted the mood. Answer me first since we need to move and find a place to rest and eat if possible. Also, I don't want to spend a night in an unsecured place. We also need to find one if we can't get to the next destination in time. Torimelio sighed and nodded. I don't know how long it passed in here, so it might not be accurate anymore. The last time, both I and Felinia are here. There should be about 2,000 sylphs in that kingdom. That many, huh? Mark contemplated. We better not mess with that hornet nest right now. Everyone nodded. What Torimelio said might be too long ago. The number of infected sylphs could already be higher, even if there were survivors that managed to escape. Mark wanted to deal with this thing as soon as possible though. By what the environment appeared to look like, that carpet of pulsating flesh was the cause of all this dried up mess. So, the next one should be the kingdom of duendes, right? Mark asked Pephile while glancing at Torimelio and Felinia. That's right. Pephile agreed. 2 mountains to the east from here, if I remember correctly. Sure enough, it was quite a distance away. Just hearing about it made everyone feel tired. It might be a short distance if it was flat land. However, going up and down mountains made it not only farther but harder to go to. Going around the mountain was not plausible either as they would end up needing to climb more mountains. They did not know now whether they should be glad about the whole place being dried up or not. Even though it was a bad thing, it did help them traverse the way easier. As for the kingdom they were going to, next, it was Felinia who gave a stronger reaction. Looking at that, it seemed like Felinia and Torimelio belonged to 2 different kingdoms. Still, everyone around them was reasonable and did not push the two about their story. Everyone had circumstances, after all. Thus, they continued on their tiring journey. Sure enough, there was a lot of interception along the way. They even encountered the infected Mananangal, who was crawling using its wings, that Mark had seen before. A Mananangal was a demonic entity that looked like a human. Well, until night came. When the sun had set, a Mananangal would go in a secluded area to transform. It would separate its torso from its waist down to its feet. The separated torso would grow wings at the same time and its separated upper body would fly away to hunt prey. Their favorite diet was the fetus of a pregnant mother and they were very attracted to their smell. They would fly onto the roof of a house inhabited by a pregnant woman. Using its straw-like long tongue, it would suck the fetus out of the mother's genitals while she was sleeping through a hole in the roof or ceiling. The Mananangal's weakness was the sun and its lower half that was left hidden. Pouring salt on the exposed organs of the lower half would prevent the Mananangal from returning to its human form, and once the sun had risen, they would turn to dust. And sure enough, this Mananangal that Mark and his team encountered had mutated in a way that addressed its weakness. That was a really bad thing as it meant that even demons, that was afraid of the sun, could traverse the surface even during the day. The Mananangal they encountered was killed quickly, as it did not have its greatest advantage, which was flight. Nevertheless, the possibility of others retaining flight was there too. The thought was quite unnerving. As for the harvest, Mark actually got a black-colored crystal from the manhwa. The odd thing was that it was marble-sized. While Mark was pondering about the black crystal on his hand, May spoke. Gerger, aren't manhwas previously humans? Maybe that determines the size of the crystals? She said, although she was quite unsure of it herself. Nevertheless, what she said was plausible. It also conforms with the size of the spirit crystal that he got from killing the headless priest before. That evil spirit was also previously human, and the crystal was the same size as the physical crystals and mental crystals. And as for the races that were never human, to begin with, what he got were smaller crystals of varying sizes. I think you're right about it. Mark agreed, but we better make sure of it. May nodded in agreement. On the way up the other mountain, Amihan received several more crystals from Mark. It made her very happy. However, she did not absorb all, as she gave a few to Malaya, who was enviously watching her. Malaya had no ill intentions about her envy. It was quite natural, as anyone wanted to get stronger these days. Nevertheless, she did not want to be ill-mannered and wrestle for something that was not hers. Mark was Amihan's master, and it was all natural for her to receive something from him. Still, Amihan gave Malaya some, which she was really thankful for. You know, if you really want to be like Amihan, you can be my subordinate, like her. Mark remarked in a whisper. And of course, Malaya was very tempted. The treatment Amihan was receiving from him was something to be envious about. Nevertheless, she shook her head. She had a husband, which she shared with her sisters. She would consult them first and think, then blindly accepting the tempting offer. Gerger is being sly again. May whispered to Mark, which he could only shrug in reply. The journey over the two mountains surely took too much time. Not only that they had to deal with strange infected animals, but the terrain was also steep and hard to climb at some parts. Even with Chaflar and Gifrey's large bodies, there were some parts of the mountain that they could not traverse. By the time they reached a reasonable height on the second mountain, the sunset was already near. Mark could not help but take out his watch and phone to check the time. Unfortunately, as the laws of this world were different, both the time on the phone and watch were frozen to the time that they entered this dimension. Mark could only store the gadgets back into his bag and face the other side of the mountain. There, they saw it. Unlike the kingdom of sylphs, which looked like a forest paradise, the kingdom of duendes was different. It was a huge stone fortress embedded in the face of the rocky part of the next mountain. The stone fortress was outside the dried land. This made them all glad. The best thing, however, was despite their current distance, they could see activities of gigantic creatures around the fortress. Without a doubt, there were survivors. Day filled vertical rectangle filled vertical rectangle filled vertical rectangle filled vertical rectangle. Filled vertical rectangle filled vertical rectangle filled vertical rectangle filled vertical rectangle stone fortress, Eastern Duende territory. A fortress made of stone, it was the castle that was inhabited by the Duendes in the eastern mountains for several centuries. Compared to other kingdoms of spiritual and elemental races, it was a young kingdom. However, in terms of defense, it was more powerful. Before this kingdom was established, the mountain was only inhabited by several tribes and small colonies of duendes. It was until an attack of a powerful demonic entity happened. The demon was something that the duendes had never seen before. It was a tall humanoid with a body that was glowing due to heat. The eyes and mouth of the demon were burning with fire, and it would spit flames to attack everything it saw. The demon was transported to the mountain from a rift in space that opened. These portal-like cracks would happen from time to time, swallowing things around it until it closed. Those that were sucked in by the rift were more likely to die, while the lucky ones would find themselves transported somewhere else. Casualties emerged from the ranks of the dwellers of the mountain as they tried to fight the demon. The worst thing, a large part of the mountain was burned along with their trees and homes. Their mounds were also destroyed by the heat, making everyone homeless. The warriors and leaders of the tribes of duendes fell on the battle. As for the remaining members of those tribes, they joined other tribes in an attempt to survive the disaster. It was until the duendes had only one large tribe left, and they were left in desperation. They asked help from other kingdoms. Although it was sure that help was coming, they might have been wiped out before the support they needed would arrive. Their homes and trees were burned, and the demon was still running amok. They were losing hope. That was when one of the remaining warriors thought of an idea. He urged the members of the tribes to unite their magic and create a home that could not be burned, a place that was made of stone. That was the birth of the stone fortress that managed to hold out until a Dewata came to banish the demon. After the demon was banished, the duendes wanted to return to their previous lives. However, with what had happened, it was impossible to do so. And thus, they decided to stick together and formed a kingdom in this mountain. The warrior that led the hopeless duendes was crowned as the first king of this kingdom. He was Batumana, who was given the title of the first Ray of the Eastern Mountain. As centuries passed, the kingdom managed to recover. The position of Ray had been passed down twice. The fortress was also remodeled and furnished many times that they stopped counting. The main areas of the fortress were made bigger to allow larger creatures into the fortress. It showed their hospitality and friendliness to others due to respect to the Dewata that aided them in that crisis. Now, the third Ray of Eastern Mountain was facing a dilemma far worse than the first Ray. Inside the large conference room made to welcome their large important guests, current Ray, Hiramano, sat on his small throne. Beside him was his queen, the current Reina of Eastern Mountain, Malabinia. Together with the king and queen, there were also the representatives of other races. When the invasion of the soulless humans and animals they called Infecta, those races that had nowhere to go took shelter in this fortress. The Infecta turned their own kind against them, and many fell from their relentless pursuit. Thus, they all decided to form an alliance to preserve one of the last places they could go to in the mainland. Except for the king and queen of this fortress, there were 8 more creatures from different races in the room. One was a tall man who could barely fit the height of the room and had no choice but sit down near the doorway. He had black skin, rugged hair, thick beard, and was smoking tobacco. The creature was a tree dweller known as Capre. He was the chosen representative of their kind and was called Ubaga. Just beneath the throne, a beautiful woman with a jeweled horn on her forehead. The most eye-catching thing about her, however, was that from her waist was a body of a horse. Her name was Amayana, an Ongate who was also known for their love for jewels. She represented both the Ongates and the Tikbalangs. Another was a heavily built man whose name was Porugus. He was a Seringe, a race of creatures with humanoid bodies, but his head and lower body were of a water buffaloes. They were known for the beautiful jewel on their ears that they treasured the most. He was currently hiding his ear, though, as Amayana was glancing at it with obscure intentions. A Kibon was also present in the room. He was Goroyo, an old chief of one of the Kibon tribes that managed to survive. Beside Goroyo, a small girl with golden hair was present. She was the representative of Bukaz, Igana. The sixth was called Salvorio, an old-looking man with skin that looked like carabao hide, wings of a bat, and fingers facing backward on both hands and feet. This Encanto was known as an Allen. As for the last 2, they were husband and wife. The king and queen of the destroyed kingdom about 2 mountains to the west. They were the king, Buhawi, and the queen, Benaya. Of course, without a kingdom, they were just a representative of the surviving sylphs and not a pair of king and queen anymore. These representatives were here to discuss their next actions. They were still able to hold their fort using unconventional methods and should be able to keep the Infecta at bay for years without a problem. The pressing thing, however, was that the drained land at the west was continuously spreading. In another few days, the river that kept the boundary of his mountain to others would start to dry up. If this continued, not only that they would lose the mountain, the main defense they were using would be rendered useless. Not to mention, they needed to eat and drink. The spread of the Infecta already destroyed the balance of their ecosystem. Sooner or later, food and water would be scarce for them. This situation would even come faster if they did not address the cause of the drought in the areas west of this mountain. Everyone knows why we are here, am I right? Hiramano spoke, in which everyone nodded in agreement. Of course, They did that while throwing stern glances at the pair of sylphs inside the room. It was not surprising, and the two sylphs could only look down. The main cause of this crisis was their fallen kingdom, after all. It won't be long, the Tikbalangs would not be able to use their abilities, Amayana spoke. Once that time came, expect more trouble with the infecta gathering outside this fortress. We all know that, Goroyo said with his deep soothing voice. But does anyone have an idea we can use to deal with the situation? Everyone went silent. It seemed that no one had any idea to destroy that thing. Aigana then raised her small hand, which took the attention of everyone. She had to do this as her small voice could get drowned easily by the gigantic creatures in the room. Is it possible for us to meet a king of Serenas? We can ask him to make it rain. Maybe, it will delay the situation until we can find a good solution. Everyone started to consider what the golden-haired girl said, but then, some of them shook their head. You should know that it is not easy to meet a king of Serenas, Hiramano spoke. They are very wary against us land dwellers. Furthermore, there is no way for us to reach their kingdom under the sea. Unless we have a Sayokoi with us. Unfortunately, not even one turned up in our fortress to take shelter against the infecta. Everyone agreed at what the king of Duendes had said. Furthermore, it was also possible that they were having the same problem with the invasion of the infecta. Some of the nearby kingdoms of Serenas already faced the same fate as what happened with the sylphs. Just get everyone out, march to that place, destroy everything, done. Porugus said with his deep loud voice. Right. Let us do that. Another deep voice echoed as Ubaga agreed with the Seringe. Of course. The two received annoyed stares from the others because of their simple-mindedness. They started to regret letting these barbarian races to join the meeting. Where is Denia in the first place? If she is here, we might be able to find a solution. Salvorio's gruff old voice was heard as he questioned the only person not in attendance at this meeting. Denia was a young Dewata. Even though she was young, she was the most powerful among the individuals in this region. She was also the one bringing survivors to this fortress. To that question, Hiramano answered. Denia went out to look for more of those that survived the catastrophe we are facing. Right now, she is searching in the mountains to the north. Hearing that, they all sighed. Denia was such a good-natured girl. She went out for the nth time to face danger in order to gather the poor souls that were still fleeing from he infectas. In fact, the lives of the remaining sylphs of that fallen kingdom owed their lives to Denia. If not for her, none of them would have been able to survive. Thus, while waiting for Denia's return, they all started to rack their brains out for ideas. Well, except the two muscle brains, of course. They continued giving suggestions and weighing the pros and cons of that suggestion. They also put out what the sylphs knew about that carpet of flesh and considered the information to their ideas. Amidst the discussion, a duende appeared by the door of the room at a very fast speed. A message for our Rey, Hiramano, the duende said as loud as he could while kneeling on the floor. Speak. Hiramano gave his permission. Two gigantic beings are seen by our sentries moving down the mountain to the west inside the dead territory. The one leading the way is suspected to be a dragon. What? Buhawi shouted in shock that he unknowingly cut off the messenger. Dragons in the surface had gone extinct thousands of years ago. The only ones left are the sealed ones, demonic ones, and undead ones, and none of them should be able to come here. Buhawi. Hiramano spoke. Calm down first and let him finish. Besides, it is only suspected, it is not confirmed yet. Buhawi realized that he was being rude. He apologized and retreated. Continue. The Ray of Duendes commanded the messenger. The two giants seem to be serving as mounts. Several individuals are riding on their backs. Also, the sentries suspect some of them to be humans. What? Now, it was everyone's turn to be shocked. Humans being lost and entering this dimension by accident was not new. There were also times that a group of humans appeared. As such, the sudden appearance of humans was not what they were shocked about. They were shocked by the fact that humans were traversing the dried land they labeled as dead territory and was still alive. "Are they going here?" Hiramano asked. "Yes, it seems," the messenger replied. "The sentries witnessed them pointing at our fortress and are heading towards this direction. Our soldiers and the sentries are humbly asking for your instructions, our Rei," the messenger then added. "Humans." Hiramano took in a deep breath. "Tell our soldiers to prepare to escort us. Before doing anything against them, we should ask their purpose first." "Yes, our Rei." The messenger bowed and ran out of the room. He was really fast to the point of leaving afterimages. "What is the point of meeting those humans?" Porugus spoke. "Just kill them." Hearing that, Amayana sighed in exasperation. He glared at the jewel on Porugus' ear. "Will you get smarter after I rip that jewel out of your ear? I'll be glad to keep it as a keepsake." "No." Porugus covered the jewel with his large hands and retreated a step. "Then shut your mouth." Amayana continued. "The messenger said that some of the individuals are human, not all of them. There might be a reason why they appeared here and is going to this fortress." Everyone, except for the Capre, nodded. The Capre did not get at the meaning of Amayana, although he was also against blindly killing humans. Thus, the meeting was postponed. At first, it was just Hiramano who was going to meet the visitors. However, it ended up with all of them coming. After all, who would not be curious about these unusual visitors at a very unusual timing? Day filled vertical rectangle 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 border river, eastern mountain foot. Halfway down the mountain, Mark and his team encountered fewer attacks from the infected creatures. Furthermore, the closer they get to the border where the dry land and the fertile soil transitioned, the lesser infected they encountered. What bordered the dry mountain and the other claimed by the duendes was a river flowing from north to south. The river was about 50 meters wide, and the flow of the water was considerably strong. Even a fully grown human adult would have great difficulties crossing the river without a bridge. Nevertheless, the strong current of the river did not matter to both Chaflar and Giffer. At the deepest parts, Chaflar just flapped its wings and flew to the other side while Giffer just crossed it normally. Not minding the strong current, everyone in their team could agree about one thing. The river was beautiful. Even in the deep parts, the water was crystal clear. Sadly, they could not find a single fish swimming at the shallow parts where the current was not strong. Reaching the other side of the river, Mark signaled for everyone to stop and rest. "Phew. Finally, my legs are numb," Colleen exclaimed as she jumped off from Gifre's back. After shaking her legs, she then went towards Mark, who was assisting May and the little girls to get down from Chaflar's back. "Hey, Mark. I don't think they needed assistance to go down, right?" She blurted out the first question that came into her mind. That caused Mark to turn to her with a sigh before he replied. "Because they wanted to. You really spoil them, aren't you?" said the woman spoiled by her father. That exchange made Colleen stop. She could not refute his last sentence, after all. There, she finally asked the real question that made her approach Mark. "By the way, why did we stop here? That stone castle is just about a kilometer away." Mark did not need to answer as someone else spoke behind her. "Bessie, it's because we can't," Alana replied while staring at the entrance of the forest in front of them. That made Colleen, Edsel, Pearl, and Mara confused. Hearing Alana's deduction and seeing her reaction, Pephile spoke. "You're quite something too," he complimented. "It hasn't been long since you awakened your demonic blood, and you can already feel unusual magical fluctuations. For others, it might take months or even years." "Is that so?" Alana replied with a bit of uncertainty. "Then, there's magic applied in the forest in front of us?" Colleen asked. "There is." It was Spera who replied. "If I'm correct, it's illusion magic to disorient the sense of direction of anyone who enters. So, if we enter the forest carelessly, we might get lost. Even though the forest doesn't seem to be too thick?" Mara asked. Correction, Mark interjected. Not might, we will definitely get lost and travel in circles. They probably set this up to deter the infected from approaching that stone castle if they enter through the forest. Mark then turned to Tarimaleo and the others. This should be a work of a Tikbalang, right? It should be. Tarimaleo agreed. Normally, Tikbalangs use this magic to play tricks to their victims. I never thought that they are clever enough to use it to deter the infected. Well, doesn't this magic gets cancelled when the victim wore their shirts inside out? Colleen asked another question. There, Pephile playfully replied. It's not like the infected can take off their clothes and wear it inside out. Infected animals and insects don't wear clothes in the first place. Colleen was stumped as she was made fun of. Alana tapping on her shoulder to sympathize did not help either. Papa, how are we going to enter? Miracle, who was stretching her arms up in front of Mark, asked. Knowing what the little girl wanted, Mark picked her up and carried her in his arms. I can destroy this illusion, I guess. Don't. Felinia, who knew how important this illusion was for her kingdom, could not help but shout. I'm joking, all right? Mark shrugged his shoulders. Please, don't even joke about that, Felinia retorted. Felinia, calm down, all right? I'm not the type of person to bypass my allies. Besides, some guys are already coming to greet us. There was no need to elaborate on Mark's words. Everyone immediately knew what he meant. Now knowing why they stopped, they took the opportunity to rest a bit. Even though they just traveled for a whole day, they somehow felt that it was too long. They felt too tired than they were supposed to be. Abigail could not handle it anymore. Mark had to give Miracle to May, and he carried Abigail, who took a nap in his arms. It did not take too long, and a fluctuation of energy was felt by Mark and several members of his group. They turned their heads towards the forest in front. That was when they saw the forest distort, and several figures of varying sizes went out of the distortion. These creatures were being led by a pair of duendes in golden clothing, riding a large golden bird that was hovering in the air using magic. There were also other 8 individuals standing directly behind the couple. Behind them, many creatures that appeared to be either soldiers or warriors were standing with their weapons ready for battle. What an assortment! Mark murmured as he recognized the races of each creature in front of him. As much as he was an otaku for anime and video games, the thing that took his interest in his own country was its mythological creatures. Although there were many inaccurate depictions of these creatures, the main features of these creatures were at least correct, which made it easier to recognize them. While Mark was staring at the group of creatures, they were also observing his. And to say, the group of creatures had unsightly expressions. They could still tolerate that some of their visitors were humans. However, they were able to recognize that Giffer, Logan, and Jeanette were infecta. For their visitors, to have 3 infecta in their group, they started to have doubts. Still, the king of duendes decided to keep it cool. I am the ruler of this kingdom. The 3rd ray of the eastern mountain, Hiramano. His eyes then landed on Mark. Are you their leader? I want to know the reason for you and your people to come into my territory. Hiramano exuded an aura of authority as he inquired for the purpose of the visitors. Mark did not reply and made a rude gesture of looking away from the king. He did not plan to be rude, though. He was just signaling for Felinia to show herself. The king and queen did not mind the rude gesture. However, the soldiers among the duendes seemed to take that offensively. A high-ranking one was about to call Mark for his rudeness. Before he could speak, however, he froze. Father, mother. Felinia, who was escorted by Tarimaleo, went forward. Almost all of the duendes froze as they recognized Felinia. The shock was more apparent to the king and queen. Hiramano still managed to keep his calm. Unfortunately, his wife did not. Before anyone was able to react, Malabinia had already turned into a fast blur as she ran towards Felinia while disregarding her safety. The next thing Felinia knew, she was already in a warm embrace of her mother. My daughter. Malabinia sobbed. Teary-eyed, Felinia returned the embrace. Mother, I'm back. Welcome back. Seeing their queen jump towards a potential danger, the soldiers were ready to attack it if Mark and his group made a single threatening move. It was unnecessary, though. Mark's group only reacted warmly to the scene. Torimelio's other wives even shed tears to see the reunion between Felinia and her mother. Ignoring the mother and daughter, Mark turned to the king. "We are here to gather information. Also, Felinia is worried about her kingdom. That is why we are here." And of course, while they believed the reason about Felinia, they would not easily believe Mark. "What information?" the king asked. This time, his aura was toned down. The queen was currently with the princess, at Mark's camp. They did not want to trigger them into making dangerous moves. Mainly, it's about how the outbreak reached this dimension. Also, about that thing that occupied the Sylph's kingdom. Hearing the second part, the king and queen of Sylphs flinched. "What do you mean by outbreak?" the king of Duendes questioned once more. "If you want to hear about it, it's a long story. It is better if we find a better place to talk about it." "Well, the most important thing is that the outbreak I'm talking about is about those." Mark then pointed on the other side of the river where 3 infected sylphs could be seen rushing towards them. It seemed that these ones felt the fluctuation when the illusion was opened. Seeing the 3 sylph infectas, the soldiers formed a defensive line in front of their king. Some were ready to use magic to intercept. Mark, on the other hand, spoke. "Emihan, capture those 3. "Okay." Emihan, who was hiding behind Shaflar, flew out to face the 3 infected sylphs. The 3 infected sylphs started to throw clumps of air towards Emihan, who shielded herself without problems. When she got close enough, she controlled the air around the 3 and encased the 3 in an invisible prison. With the force of the wind trapping their bodies, the 3 infected sylphs could only growl. They tried to use magic to break the prison to no avail. Emihan then flew back to Mark with the 3 infected sylphs hovering behind her. This display shocked the group of creatures. Even more so for the king and queen of sylphs. "Well, what do you people think?" Mark asked. "Can we enter? I want to talk about these guys. We can exchange information." Information, that was what they really needed. Everything happened without any warning or chance to gather proper information, after all. They felt the disturbance happening in the mortal world, since the start, and because of that, the only kingdom here that had a spirit tree, the kingdom of sylphs, sent some of their people to gather information. However, none of those they sent managed to return. That was why these races were lacking the information they needed. After all, who would not want to know the cause of the catastrophe that they were facing at the moment? Furthermore, it was a catastrophe that could potentially wipe them all out. "I would like to exchange information as much as you do," Hiramano replied with a stern expression. "However, I can't do that without hearing an explanation about those 3. The king of Duendes pointed at Giffer, Logan, and Jeanette. Mark then smiled. "I know that you will ask that," he said. He already noticed that these creatures were wary about the 3 since the start. That was why he asked Emihan to capture these 3 infected sylphs. "Aphalia, it's your turn." At this moment, these creatures witnessed a scene that made them question the sylphs. It was because Aphalia displayed an ability that a sylph never had as she gained control of the tree sylphs. She even made the 3 sylph dance, which made the audience stare agape. "My sylph here has the ability to control these creatures. That is why you shouldn't worry about these 3, they're under our control." Mark patted Jeanette's head, which she voluntarily rubbed her head onto his palm. "They won't make any trouble." What could the king of Duendes say after seeing that? Besides, Mark's group brought Felinia home. The reason for him to disagree was diminishing. "Don't worry, father, we can trust him," Felinia added. "We had been under his protection for some time already." Hearing that, the king finally gave in. Hiramano then turned to the creatures behind him and spoke in a language Mark could not understand at all. "Master," Emihan whispered. "That is the local language they use in these parts of the spirit dimension." "That's right," Pephile added. "Not everyone can communicate using Tagalog that humans in the Philippines are using. They have their local language and only a few can speak human language. I see. Mark murmured while the others also nodded in understanding. In the Philippines, there were about 170 languages known to be in use. It was not surprising for the spirit dimension to have a different language considering that it was a different world. The creatures spoke for a few minutes. There seemed to be some disagreement according to Pephile and Amihan. In the end, the king had to resort to his authority over his territory to shut the opposition down. Finally, he turned to Mark's group and said, "Follow us." Day. Illusion Barrier, Eastern Mountain. With the invitation of the Ray of Eastern Mountain Hiramano, Mark and his team followed his lead. Of course, it was not an all-positive thing as some of the races had unsightly expressions and emotions towards the Ray's decision. After all, humans had been known to hunt down their kind in the mortal world. It was even more apparent for the Serengay, who did not try to hide his hatred towards humans. Some of the races in the vicinity did not like humans either. It was very likely that they were among those that lived in the mortal world before retreating to this dimension. This was not surprising as according to Amihan's stories, during the Spanish Inquisition, many races were hunted and forced to leave the mortal world. As for the Serengay, his hatred towards humans was not unwarranted. His kind had been hunted for ages because of the jewel embedded in their ears. These jewels had been used by Rajas or Datus for expensive jewelry. Most of the time, it was sent as dowries to the family of the woman they want to marry. Of course, the Serengays were not easy to hunt, and hunters would end up having casualties. That made the beautiful jewel even more valuable. With that strange atmosphere made by the mixed emotions of everyone present, they all entered the forest. Outside the forest with towering trees that even allowed Shaflar and Giffer to be under its shade, everything looked clear. When they entered, however, except for those that could not display emotions or had emotional disabilities, everyone else was shocked. The real appearance of the forest could not be from the outside. Inside the illusion, however, everything was clear. There was quite a handful of infected roaming around. All of them were wandering randomly and did not seem to notice that there were living individuals passing by. These infected, without a doubt, were under the effects of the illusion. They were too vulnerable that a lot of them were being killed by the races without them knowing. This showed how effective their method of employing tikbalangs to protect the fortress. Mark noticed, however, that there were some kinds of infected that the races were trying to stay clear of. Probably, there were issues about those, and the folklore creatures were not able to kill these infected. Going out of the forest, Mark and his group witnessed a wondrous sight that they could not see from outside. The stone fortress was within sight even though it was still about 500 meters away. As for the rest of the way, there was a magical community. It was filled with different kinds of creatures that were wandering about. Bizarre structures made of soil, plants, stone, and even trees filled the area. Even giant mushrooms that could only be seen in fairy tales were present. Of course, while Mark and his group were amazed by the wondrous sight, it was the same for the creatures they saw along the way. They stopped to give respect to the king, queen, and the representatives of the races, while they gave Mark's group a bunch of stares with different emotions. Some were positive, many were negative, and there were also curious ones staring at Giffer, who looked like a bizarre creature from another dimension. The context was not wrong, though. More than that, May's appearance was getting too much attention. Amihan and Pephile whispered that many of them seemed to be mistaking her for a new Diwata visiting the fortress. It was even though her clothes and miracle that was on her arms indicated that she was not. Under those stares, they arrived at the stone fortress. Seeing it up close, it was very huge, way bigger than they thought when they saw the structure from afar. The whole structure was to wonder, that was what they thought as they entered the gates of moving vines. As it was made of magic, there were no signs of any structural system or construction method being used. The walls were as flawless as a river pebble. Under their feet, the floor was smooth but had enough resistance to keep everyone from falling. There were no foundations nor connections between the walls, floor, and ceiling that indicated that each was built differently. It just showed the fact that the whole structure was raised from the dirt as a whole. Giffer, Shaflar, and Logan were decided to be left in the front yard of the fortress. Their bodies were too large for the interior of the structure. The majority of the soldiers also left and had gone back to their duties. They only left a few to guard the king, queen, and the representatives. Still, these few soldiers left were not people to belittle. Mark could feel that some of them were even stronger than the king and the representatives. The king spoke some words to the representatives. Emihan translated the language for Mark and the others. It seemed that the king told the representatives to return to the meeting hall as they would continue the meeting soon. The representatives left, and a few turned their backs while grumbling incomprehensible words. Turning back to Mark's group, Hiramano spoke. "You all seem to be tired. Let my general, Mario, guide you to our guest rooms." The king gestured to one of the duendes that was wearing armor. This duende seemed to have a decent personality as he humbly presented himself in front of everyone. Well, that should be the case if he could just remove that fierce glare he was directing at Terimalio. Terimalio, who was receiving the glare, only shrugged his shoulders with a bitter expression. That gesture, however, seemed to have worsened the mood of Mario. Although the king said to them that they could rest first, Mark did not want to waste time. Thus, he told the others to go, while he would join the meeting together with Pephile. The king did not disagree about Mark's decision. In fact, he also wanted Mark to join the meeting. Information, after all, was very crucial at this point. While the king guided Mark and Pephile to the meeting room, the queen took Felinia off to join Mark's group. Apparently, it seemed that she wanted to meet the others that Felini deemed as sisters. Arriving at the meeting hall, the presence of Mark and Pephile caused quite a change in the atmosphere. Fortunately, none of them voiced their concerns about letting Mark and Pephile joining. They also wanted to learn about everything that happened. After all, they already lost the means to go there and gather information while the ones they sent before never came back. Thus, Mark and Pephile became the focus of the meeting at this point. Without hesitation, Mark told everyone what had happened in the mortal world and the cause of this, the mess they were facing. Learning about mutagen and that it was actually something that came from outer space, some of the hatred the representatives had was lessened. It seemed that some of them believed that humans were to blame about what was happening. After hearing that the mortal world was facing the same catastrophe and humans were on the verge of extinction, their hate dwindled further. Of course, the hate about the past was still there and was unaffected. Mark had told them the general knowledge he could narrate and without the unnecessary specifics that he could hold back for advantage. He did not have to describe every detail, after all, and lose the exchange. After his narration, Mark inquired about how things started in this dimension. The king of duendes, together with the king of sylphs and the representative of the ongates, told the story. Asterisk 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 compared to the time that passed in the mortal world since the outbreak, it had just been a month and a week since they noticed that something strange was happening in the mortal world. At that time, the king of sylphs sent soldiers to see what was happening as they were the only ones that had a spirit tree in the area. Unfortunately, not a single one returned. Since then, some sort of rumor started to circulate and was passed by tribes and kingdoms. Apparently, they encountered some enraged humans that got lost into this world. As not all spirits and elementals hated humans, they tried to help them to return to the mortal world, only to get attacked. Luckily, the instances were rare, and there would only be one or two that would get lost. There were also no casualties reported as the humans attacking were immediately restrained by magic and were sent back. After a week, the instances started to become more frequent. The residents of the spirit dimension could already feel that the barrier between the mortal world and this dimension was getting unstable. That was when the term infecta started to circulate as some casualties appeared and became like infecta, attacking their own kind. The situation was still controlled at that time, and they tried to find a cure for their infected families and friends to no avail. There were also some odd-looking creatures and animals appearing in the same manner and having the same behavior. The spirits still managed to control the situation, preventing it from worsening. It changed about 2 weeks ago. Some sort of disturbance happened on the western coast of the land. The surviving witnesses said that it seemed to be akin to two demonic deities fighting. Cracks in space appeared, which caused miasma and flames to seep out of the cracks. Their assumption was hard to doubt, as only some demonic races could control miasma, and the flames contained a demonic aura. Although the disturbance did not take too long and vanished, it left the space in a seriously unstable state. Many rifts in space appeared after 2 days until the stability of the space returned. The problem was that, though, in those 2 days, dozens upon dozens of infecta were transported because of the rifts. They varied in sizes, strength, and appearance. They started to invade the kingdoms and killed the tribes they encountered. Many members of the races became infecta with their magical abilities remaining intact. This caused another level of threat to everyone living in this land. Just on the first day they appeared, the infecta already conquered the western areas and was spreading fast. Many races tried to flee to the eastern parts to no avail. Some made it, the majority did not. Since then, this part of the spirit dimension had turned into a mess filled with deadly creatures that continued to mutate day by day. Hearing this, Mark was keeping his straight face. Inside, he already wanted to slap his forehead. So, the majority of things that happened here were because of me and that flame demon? He thought. No wonder that after the battle between him and Garvlam, the whole Bay City settlement was quiet for several days. The infected that should have been attacking the settlement could have been attracted to the rifts in space. After all, these rifts that connected to the spirit dimension would surely release strong magical energy to attract them in entering. Nevertheless, there was no use to dwell in it. That was what Mark had decided. According to what he heard just now, the barrier between the mortal world and spirit dimension was already getting unstable. It was just a matter of time before things ended up the same way. The accident that he and Garvlam caused only hastened the inevitable. It was already bound to happen sooner or later. Mark also inquired about the thing that occupied the kingdom of sylphs. Fortunately, it was not related to him. Apparently, during the spread of infectas, a Berberoka, somehow, entered their spirit tree through the mortal world. It was still unknown how it was able to enter. The worst thing, that Berberoka was in the midst of turning into an infecta. It suddenly mutated inside the space of their spirit tree, filling the space with its mass. It attacked the sylphs residing inside the space, causing the majority of the sylphs to become infectas because of its tentacles. The king and the queen, along with their close aides, managed to escape because of their control of the portal going outside. But soon after they escaped, the space inside the tree collapsed, causing the more than 3,000 infected sylphs to swarm those that were outside. Luckily, Denaya, who was gathering survivors from the western areas, was passing by and managed to save a good number of sylphs before fleeing. While they were continuing with the meeting, the person in question, the young Diwata called Denaya, arrived. Eastern mountains above the forest at the north of the Eastern Mountain Territory, a young woman wearing a white dress and a crown made of flowers could be seen flying. Her long wavy hair fluttered with the wind as she flew, holding on to her wand. She was Denaya, a young Diwata and the current overseer of the mountains in his area. The races around her jurisdiction would come to her for advice and resolve conflicts between themselves. She served as the merciful judge and the ruthless punisher. The innocents would receive justice while the guilty received banishment from the land. Denaya was not only powerful but was always fair. The races that she looked after liked her, and her existence gave them peace. Unfortunately, that peace was gone. Right now, Denaya served as the last lifeline for many. Despite the danger, she would regularly roam her land to search for those that survived and bring them to safety. This time, however, she was returning to the eastern mountain with a sad expression. She did not find any survivor this time. And probably, she would not find any in the future. While flying, several infected birds found Denaya. These beautiful and lovely colored birds became flesh-eating monsters. That thought made Denaya even sadder. With a deep sigh, she waved her staff. The infected birds froze in the air before their bodies plummeted to the ground, with their heads squashed by a strong force. Denaya did not watch the fall and just left. There was no point in staying. She just wanted to return to the last fortress in her jurisdiction. The Dewata entered the forest blanketed by illusion without any problem. She exited the woods soon, and she was welcomed by everyone that was currently living in this place. This place could be said as the last line of defense in these mountains. Still, it was good to see that everyone was coping with the situation. Danaya took her time walking towards the stone fortress in the distance. She wanted to see if everyone was doing fine and was looking at every house that she saw. That was when she reached a certain distance from the stone fortress. Her heart pounded as she felt some presence that she could not recognize. Furthermore, these individuals she felt had a demonic presence. This caused her to worry. However, she was rational. Seeing that everything seemed to be fine, and she could not detect any feeling of danger, she decided to confirm things first before making any movement. Danaya entered the gates of the fortress with the soldiers greeting her. That was when she saw 3 gigantic creatures waiting in the courtyard. What made her frown at first was that she could tell what they were. One was a demonic dragon, while 2 were infecta. However, the crease on her brows disappeared. She noticed that the dragon was sleeping without worry, while the 2 infecta were not moving at all. It was very strange. She remembered that there should be a meeting happening right now. Thus, she decided to go there to ask about what was happening. When she arrived at the meeting room, everyone kneeled before her and greeted her. The kings were not an exception. Well, except a single person, that is. Asterisk asterisk. We greet the Dewata of the Eastern Territories. The folklore creatures inside the room, including Pephile, kneeled on one knee and greeted the beautiful woman that entered the room. It left Mark to stand alone in the room. This caused some of the representatives to feel a bit annoyed. However, they knew that humans in this era did not follow these kinds of customs anymore. While annoyed, they could not reprimand him either. Mark then felt the scrutinizing stare of the Dewata that entered. It was not a questioning stare, but something that was trying to pry into his soul instead. Seeing Danaya staring at Mark, the king of Duendes decided to introduce him. Dewata Danaya, this man is called Mark. He here is a guest from the world of mortals that came to exchange information with us. Information? Danaya turned to Hiramano and asked. Yes, Dewata Danaya. Just now, we learned from him what is the current state of the world of mortals. It seemed that they had the same circumstances as ours and probably worse. Is this true? Danaya turned to Mark and asked with a serious face. As he said, I'm here to exchange information. I have no reason to lie. It's not like they could not tell a lie from the truth. Mark replied with a shrug. This caused more animosity to be directed at him, and Pephile was even hitting Mark's knee with his elbow. Danaya felt a bit relieved as she realized that Mark was not lying. Still, she wanted to be sure. Since you didn't have the reason to lie, then tell me. Are you human, a demon, or something else? Her question made the heart of the representatives pound hard. They thought that Mark was human. However, it seemed that he was not. Furthermore, a demon? They actually let a demon into their final sanctuary? They felt conflicted. However, they were in the presence of Danaya. None of them dare start a commotion. With a bit of a playful attitude, Mark replied, Can I pick all the choices? This caused everyone to become confused instead of feeling offended further. Why all? The Dewata questioned once more. Well, Mark scratched his head. I was a human before I became something that no one can tell what I am, and then, I awakened my dormant demon blood recently? His answer caused everyone, even the Dewata, to look at him strangely. Are you trying to feed us nonsense? That was when Pephile decided to speak. Please pardon me, Dewata Danaya, for speaking. However, what he said is true. Although I was not there every time, I witnessed how he awakened his demon blood. I see, a half-demon then, Danaya said. Then, what about the others? Hearing that, Mark sighed. Of course, it would not be easy. He could say that he awakened his blood, and May, the little girls, and Alana were his family members. However, he could not justify things about Chaflar. Trying to cover it up would only lead to more suspicions. Thus, there was only one way. Mark sighed. I'm not a half-demon, I'm a pure-blooded one, they said. As his words ended, 2 pairs of bat wings sprouted from his back, his eyes turned red, 2 blood-red horns grew on his forehead, and lastly, his fangs grew longer. His transformation was accompanied by the glow of his veins and pressure that made everyone here shiver. Seeing the transformation, Denia stared at Mark wide-eyed. It was the same for the representatives here that already lived for hundreds of years. A blood demon. Denia could not believe it. The supposedly extinct race resurfaced once more, and a pure-blooded appeared before her eyes. Does this answer your question? Mark said with a bit of annoyance. He was really not used to having horns or fangs. His head felt heavy because of these features. I see, so the other individuals here are the ones you turned into your kind. Denia said. They are my family. You don't have to worry about me forcing them. One of them even awakened on her own the same way I did. Mark shrugged. I see. Denia nodded. It seemed that she was relieved now. Dewatas were fair and neutral individuals for the majority of their race. They did not care what kind of creature an individual was as long as they did not commit any sin before them. Furthermore, blood demons were known to be a neutral race. Unless necessary, they would not start a conflict. One last question. Denia spoke once more. You are not here to avenge your race, are you? That question made the representatives wary. Because of what happened to the blood demons during that war, it would not be surprising if the remaining survivors hated both the spirit races and demonic races. To that question, Mark titled his head. Why should I? That did have anything to do with me. I'll repeat once more, I'm just here to exchange information. Is it that hard to understand? Mark's annoyance was already obvious. Pephile was already hitting Mark with his elbow and whispering for him to calm down. Those questions were enough for Denia, it seemed. She walked to the highest chair in the meeting room and sat down. Then, I apologize if my inquiries offended you in any way, she said. I just have to put the well-being of everyone here in priority. Denia was a reasonable individual. Even though she had the authority to question anyone here, she still apologized. Mark accepted the apology, and the meeting continued. Of course, the representatives of the races were wary towards Mark even more. Before, they just viewed him as a human that had spirits as friends. Now that they knew that he was a demon, the racial prejudice they had towards demons could not help but go out a bit. It could not be helped after all. The spirit races and the demon races were enemies. There were very few that were an exception. The meeting continued, and they started to discuss the thing that occupied the kingdom of sylphs. Unfortunately, even with Denia's attendance, they could not think of an effective idea to deal with that thing. If it was just that thing, they might be able to approach and try things to kill and destroy it. However, with over 3,000 sylphs roaming about the area, it was suicide to go and approach. The closest thing they managed to think of was having someone lure away the sylphs as they tried to destroy that gigantic carpet of tentacle-covered flesh. Unfortunately, it meant suicide for anyone that would be tasked to lure them away. As everyone racked their brains about it, Mark raised his hand a bit. I have an idea. Everyone looked at Mark. Although they were a bit glad that he was joining the discussion, there was really no reason for him to do so. Then, Mark spoke as if knowing what was in their minds. Well, my spirit tree is within the area you guys call the dead territory, so this is my problem too. That statement made everyone frozen. Denia could not help but stand up from her seat. That red spirit tree is yours? Then, that is a night-evered spirit tree, isn't it? Mark was a bit surprised, and he looked at Pephile. From all the spirit races he met, only Pephile was able to pinpoint what Chio was. Even Denia and the representatives inside the room were shocked, hearing that it was actually a night-evered spirit tree. That's right, Mark replied. I see. Denia sat back down. What is your plan? Well, you guys don't need to do anything. I will go with 2 individuals from my team. All I need for all of you is to let the other members of my group stay here safely until I return. That made everyone surprised. Even if all of them that were currently here in the fortress charged towards the kingdom of sylphs right now, half of them or more might die during the battle. Yet, Mark only needed 3 people. Just what was he thinking? However, Mark seemed to be confident about it. Besides, if he could get rid of it on his own, everyone else here would benefit without needing to do anything. Well, of course, the righteous Denia would not let that happen. If that is the case, I will go with you. I want to see what you will do. If you are able to get rid of that creature, I will promise for a reward. Those words caused murmurs between the representatives. 1. They did not really know him to entrust him such a mission, and 2. Having a Dewata promise a reward was enough for them to envy. Nevertheless, they could not do anything at all. As for Mark, he naturally agreed. He did not want to work for free, after all. If Denia did not propose this, Mark would have asked the others to give compensation. In any case, things were handled, and for most, Mark's reveal did not receive a too negative reaction. It was fortunate that he was a blood demon that was known for being neutral. If not, things would have been harder. Day. Guest rooms, Stone Fortress, Eastern Mountain. The night in the spirit dimension had finally fallen. Nonetheless, it was the time of the day for many kinds of elementals and spirits to be active. It kept the place lively despite the dark sky. Bright glowing stones, magical fruits, glowing mushrooms, and even balls of light made of magic illuminated the whole place. Not all the races needed light during the night, but for the sake of safety, they tried to light up the entire area where the survivors lived. Of course, since the whole place was surrounded by tall trees blanketed with illusion magic, the light could be barely seen outside. It was unless the attackers came from above. Still, even if that happened, everyone was ready to defend this place. To make the fortress fall, the infected would need 1,000 horde of flying ones. That was unlikely to happen for now. Inside the stone fortress, the meeting had already ended. Everyone, except for Denia and Hiramano, who still had to discuss things about the fortress, had already left the room. Mark and Pephile arrived at where the rest were brought to. They were being led by one of the king's aides who immediately left after leaving a message to the queen that was still within the guest room. Shortly after, the queen also left together with her guards after bidding goodbye to Teramilio's wives. The husband, of course, was still ignored. "Gerger, how is it?" May asked after she welcomed Mark back with an embrace. "Let's sit down first. I'll tell everyone later," Mark said as he patted May's head. He looked around. It seemed that they were brought to a guest area with several bedrooms. It was not a very classy-looking one but was surely pleasing to the eyes. For something like this to be built in this fortress, it looked like large groups of guests would frequent this place. Everyone was waiting in the lobby, except for Amihan and the 3 girls. Mark could feel that the 4 were inside one of the 4 rooms and were already asleep. Mark and Pephile sat down together with everyone and told them about what happened here in the spirit dimension. Amidst the story, dinner was brought to them. The food looked too different from what they usually had in the mortal world because of the uncanny ingredients. It was just soup and grilled meat. However, the meat was colored red, while some of the vegetables were something that they never saw before. Fortunately, Teramilio, Felinia, and Pephile were here to say that these things tasted good, or else, none of them would have eaten a single bite. The story continued while they ate. Of course, Mark hid some details in the story, specifically, his connection with all these accelerated ruckuses in this dimension. The others might not get it. However, Edsel and Colleen were present at that time. Mark trusted them that they would not babble to anyone, but at times, walls had eyes and ears. Furthermore, they were in a place that magic was not rare. Even if he could not detect anyone spying on his group, there might be some magic concealed anywhere. It was better to be cautious as Mark rather not have any conflict with the races at this moment. Pephile seemed to be confused as to why Mark hid some details. Nevertheless, he was able to read his intentions. Thus, he decided not to speak anything about it. Mark also told his plan on dealing with the situation in the kingdom of sylphs. The ones that would accompany him were Aphelia and Logan. Hearing that, anyone in here knew what he was planning, and thus, Everyone agreed in his decision. Even May was the same. No one here wanted to hold Mark back. By the way, Colleen spoke. Queen Malabinia said that there is a trade area outside the fortress every morning. Trade area? Mark tilted his head. At his question, Felinia explained. Mother said that they allowed this since not everyone here can fight and hunt. Those people can use their things to barter for extra food and also other things. I see. So, while I go out tomorrow, you all want to see? Mark asked. Of course we do. Alana exclaimed. Who knows what kind of unusual things we can find there? And what are you going to trade with them? Those words from Mark made the others stumped. They thought about trading some of their food, but that was unlikely since it was human food, after all. How about weapons? Spera suggested. We don't have that many, though. Edsel voiced. Let's just window shop. There's no problem with that, right? Colleen finally suggested, and they all decided to just do that. After all, no one here was sure about what they would be able to see there. Soon, they turned in for the rest of the night. The night was strange, though. Even though they just slept for a few hours, and it was just past midnight, they all woke up and could not go back to sleep. They all ended up idling in the room till morning. The time they spent this night, for some reason, felt like ages. Asterisk 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 when morning came, Mark and Ophelia prepared for departure. Everyone came to accompany the two out as they were called out by an aide of the king for departure. At the courtyard, they met Denia and the representatives that were already waiting. Mark told Ophelia to call Logan, which caused a bit of commotion. After all, Logan and Giffer were not moving at all ever since they were left there. Many individuals even poked and made fun of the two. It was normal as many elementals and spiritual beings were playful in nature. They disregarded the fact that the two were infectus since they were not moving. When Logan moved, there were still some individuals playing around him. That caused these creatures to scurry around while screaming in fear. Fortunately, everyone was already here in the courtyard to see all that happening. There was no misunderstanding that could happen. Of course, the representatives of the races and Denia were surprised that one of the two individuals that Mark decided to come with him was this large, fat infecta. Is everything ready? Mark asked. I am just waiting for your people, and we can go. Denia replied. Let's go then. There, they all walked towards the forest outside the fortress. It seemed that the news of Mark and Denia, going to deal with the monster that occupied the kingdom of Sylphs, had already spread outside. Many individuals on the way joined to bid good luck. Before leaving, Mark bid goodbye to everyone. Of course, not without receiving a hug from May and the little girls. Colleen tried to line up as well only to get her ears pulled back by Alana. That scene actually had a positive effect on the people around them. Seeing how this supposed family of blood demons behaved and cherished each other, it was hard to think that they were up to no good at all. Under everyone's watch, Mark, Denia, Ophelia, and Logan passed through the forest of illusions. While inside the forest, Denia spoke. You are serious about this, right? I think, you can see that I'm not joking, Mark replied. But that sylph on your shoulder, Denia pointed. She's Ophelia. He introduced the royal maid, who flew and bowed to the Dewata. Although the gesture was nice, it made Denia even more curious. Her body is a sylph, but the soul is not. Why is that? Well, of course, Denia would notice that. And thus, Mark told her the story about the deity of bloodshed and the last protector of his seal while they left the eastern mountain, and proceeded on their current journey. Of course, Mark left out his part in the story. The only thing he told Denia was how the sylph's body was intact without a soul after being possessed. Since Ophelia, who dwelled in someone else's body, needed a new body, it was the perfect chance at that time. Denia was distraught about what had happened. A guardian who was diligently guarding the seal of an evil individual died like that. It did not take too long and they reached the distance where they could already see the kingdom of Sylphs. In Mark's estimate, it was just 2 hours since they left the stone fortress. It was faster not because they were moving to a small group. The reason was because of Mark and his team that already dealt with the enemies they could see along the way yesterday. There were many new ones but were dealt with swiftly. "What are you going to do now?" Denia asked. "Say, there is no issue to kill all the sylphs there, right?" Mark asked in return to confirm. Denia was confused but still answered. "Those sylphs already became infecteds. Although it hurts my heart, there is nothing that we can do but put them out of their miseries." "Well then, there's no holding back." Mark smiled. "Miss Diwata, you stay here in the safe distance and watch. Ophelia, let's go." Hearing that, Denia was confused and wanted to tell Mark to explain. However, before she could say anything, Mark had already flown off with Ophelia. Logan also followed while running on the ground, causing quite a tremor in every step. Of course, Mark and Ophelia's presence in the air as they closed into the kingdom of sylphs agitated the hornet nest. Like a cloud of green-colored bees, the majority of the infected sylphs flew to intercept Mark. On the other hand, the rest remained around the pulsating flesh, as if protecting it. "There's no doubt, that thing is a leader-type alpha," Mark deduced as he saw the orchestrated movement of the infected sylphs. Ophelia agreed to his assumption. Actually, Mark wanted to get the attention of all the sylphs. However, this much should already be fine. In his estimate, there were already around 2,500 sylphs trying to swarm him. Denia, who was watching, became nervous. Even she did not know whether she would be able to deal with something at this scale. And the scariest thing happened. It was the instinct of the infected to use anything at their disposal. As long as their bodies had the ability, they would use it without any regard for anything. Thus, an overwhelming amount of magical energy started to gather in the area. The amount was enough to make Denia gulp and shiver. The sky started to darken, and clouds started to gather, moving in a large spiral. What made Denia even more shocked was even her had no idea that this was possible. Before, these infected sylphs were only throwing clumps of air towards their prey. The current happening before her eyes were beyond everyone's knowledge. If it was like this, even if the survivors gathered in the stone fortress to deal with this situation, there was a very high chance of them being wiped out. This was practically a suicide. She wanted to call Mark back to abort this mission. That was when she noticed. Mark was just flapping his wings while watching the infected sylphs create an orchestra of growls and moans. He was smiling without fear. It was a bizarre scene. Mark was not doing anything. Denia was sure that he was not feeling fear, but he was just there in the air while flapping his wings calmly, evading some of the sylphs charging towards him. No, it seemed that rather than watching, he was waiting for something. Then, the amount of magical energy in the air reached its peak. Mark also made his move. Together with Ophelia, he turned into black smoke that charged towards the center of the tornado that started to form in the sky. Then Denia witnessed a scene that shook her soul. Day. Sylph Kingdom, Dead Territory, Central Eastern Mountains. The powerful gusts of wind blew as the devastating tornado started to form. The already dried soil of the area began to fly around, making the vision below thickly obscured. It was as if a sandstorm was about to rage, cause chaos and devastation. At the center of the spiraling gusts of wind in the sky, Mark flew. He was looking at the scene below. This kind of scene was something you could see in disaster movies where a tornado coming from the sky was about to touch the ground. Mark did not expect this kind of thing to happen either. He already thought of this before and concluded that this blanket of pulsating flesh was an intelligent kind of infected. The fact that it was able to keep all the sylphs it had infected around it to serve as protection was the evidence. When the sylphs divided into two groups, with one to deal with Mark and the other to protect, it proved his suspicions further. And one last thing, this leader-type alpha was intelligent and perceptive enough to consider him as a threat. Or else, why would it resort to an attack of a catastrophic scale? Unfortunately, it was just what Mark wanted. He already found a way to strengthen Emihan and Ophelia. However, he could not neglect himself either. Though was quite unlucky that most of the infected they encountered yesterday gave a very meager amount of magical energy for him to absorb. This time, however, it was surely in the same scale of that mutated whale before. He would not pass this opportunity. And thus, "All this is mine," Mark exclaimed, as a thick cloud of miasma exploded on his surroundings. The terrifyingly looking black clouds spread fast, engulfing the tornado in its entirety along with the majority of the infected sylphs raging about. Their growls, roars, and moans were swallowed and vanished into the darkness as their bodies slowly turned to dust. As the black cloud traveled down to the ground, it started to spin and slowly took the shape of the tornado. The miasma did not just swallow the tornado, it slowly became the tornado itself, swallowing every bit of magical energy present in the surroundings. However, that was not enough. Mark, inside the black tornado, closed his eyes. He concentrated on sensing any magical fluctuation in his surroundings. Specifically, he was aiming for the magical fluctuation of the infected sylphs that was not swallowed by the cloud of miasma. One by one, he started to feel them. The infected sylphs were somehow staying out of the tornado. It seemed that the carpet of pulsating flesh below detected danger and was trying to keep its protectors alive. As if Mark would let that go just like that. From the black-colored disaster, multitudes of surges of miasma burst forth like hundreds of tentacles, all of which directed to the sylphs that were already returning to guard near their leader. Unfortunately for them, while they could fly fast, the surges of miasma moved faster. After all, not only that the infected sylphs already used up the majority of their energy, but the leader type Alpha was not a sylph and could not utilize their abilities effectively. One after another, the retreating infected sylphs turned to dust after their bodies were swallowed by the exploding surges of miasma. Quite a distance away, Denia was watching the whole ordeal. She was shocked beyond compare because of the scale of the disastrous scene before her. It was also not wrong to say that she was afraid. Even if she used up all of her energy and sacrificed her existence, she doubted that she would be able to contend with what was happening right now. It was no wonder I can't measure his abilities, Denia subconsciously said, as her wide eyes stared at the black tornado. She had been measuring Mark ever since she saw him. And she realized early on, while she could tell that he was not human, she could not tell how strong he was. Miasma was kind of a silent killer. It might cause strong fluctuations when being used, especially when it clashed with other energies. But when dormant or purely alone, it was undetectable. Only those races that had more powerful sensing abilities and demonic races that could control miasma would be able to distinguish it in that state. This was one of the things that made existences that could control miasma unpredictable. What she could not fathom, however, was how Mark was able to control miasma while having a mortal body. Only the beings that were able to use miasma were formless demons, demons born of miasmic energy, and those that had been corrupted by miasma. That was when she remembered Mark's answer when she asked him yesterday about what he was. She concluded that he was half human and half demon while neglecting the third choice. He was also something else different from the two. An unknown existence. Something unfathomable that it could break the balance of the plane of existence. He was something that should not exist, and yet, he was existing. Mark was an enigma, an anomaly, and an unfathomable being for mortals, demons, and spirits. Denia felt shivers on her back. It was lucky that she was not rash when she arrived yesterday, and when she questioned him, she now realized how close to death she might have been. In the sky, the one-sided battle was still ongoing. The more than 2,000 infected sylphs were now reduced to about 500, and for some reason, the surges of miasma seemed to avoid a few sylphs while it targeted others without mercy. Below, the cloud of mixed sand, dry soil, and dust of dead sylphs started to calm down. Even the gusts of wind were disappearing. Without the magical energy controlling the wind to support its creation, the tornado slowly vanished. In its place, the tall tower of miasma stood instead, and slowly, even the miasma started to gather and shirk into one place. It did not take too long before Mark and Aphelia could be seen once more. He had both his hands stretched forwards as the miasma spiraled towards his palms. Seeing that, Denia was even more shocked. She could not fathom as to how Mark's mortal body was able to handle such a vast amount of miasma. Furthermore, what he was absorbing right now was about half more than what he had released. Mark smiled, feeling the newly absorbed energy in his body. He got quite a harvest. As for the remaining sylphs that he deliberately allowed to live, it was now their turn. From his experience yesterday, spirit races could give him varying sizes of crystals even though they came from the same race. And those with larger magical capacity would give the largest ones. That was why he left those for last and would turn them into what he called energy crystals. Mark then turned to the sylph on his shoulder, who was waiting for his cue. Aphelia, your turn. Yes, master. Aphelia nodded. She then flew off from Mark's shoulder. In this battle, she had 2 roles given to her. The first was to choose from the infected sylphs in front of her to become her subordinates. Yesterday, the first energy crystal given to her gave her 3 slots for controlling a regular human infected. As sylphs, one of those slots could hold 2. The 3 sylphs they captured yesterday for the demonstration was already disposed of. They were just weak ones, and only one of the 3 gave Mark a crystal. In Mark's view, it was better to get stronger ones. Unfortunately, Mark had yet to get another clear energy crystal, or she might have at least another slot open. It did not take long for her, and she picked 6 of the strongest sylphs that flew towards her after she controlled them. As for the remaining ones, Mark charged towards them with a sinister smile. While Mark was collecting the sylphs, it was time for Aphelia's next move. Logan, who was left at the ground, was now standing beside the leader-type alpha. The fat giant was ignored by the enemy because of the fact that they were both infected. Furthermore, the alpha's attention was on Mark, which allowed the embodiment of gluttony to approach without suspicion. Aphelia then gave the command. Eat. That command made Logan's eyes as if it was glowing with hunger. He opened his large mouth and took a huge chunk out of the pulsating flesh. Of course, that damage was insignificant to the enemy as it slowly healed like how it did when it was feeding the infected sylphs under its control. However, that speed of regeneration would be able to catch up to the hungry beast. Like a gigantic ghost that was not fed for millenniums, Logan gobbled up the body of the leader-type alpha. It was up to the point that it could not ignore the giant glutton. It seemed to be confused as to what was happening as it was not attacking Logan. But when a considerable chunk was taken off its body, it started to shiver. A tremor was created from its movements as it moved thousands of its tentacles in anger. Without a doubt, it now viewed Logan as an enemy. More than dozens of tentacles pointed at Logan and attacked. The tentacles pierced Logan's body. Logan could have died there. However, not only that Aphelia made him dodge the blow to his head, but the tentacles were not strong enough to pierce Logan's mutated bones. Since it sensed that Logan was still unharmed, the enemy decided to do its greatest move. It tried to use its tentacles to absorb the liquid inside Logan's body and turn him into a dried corpse. That was when the horror struck. The supposed wounds on Logan's body where the tentacles were still stuck, opened up like mouths and started to suck the tentacles into his body instead. Crorarackkarao. An incomprehensible sound was let out by the carpet of pulsating flesh as it finally sensed danger from Logan. It voluntarily cut off the tentacles being sucked and tried to attack once more. Its attack ended up futile as the same thing had happened. Furthermore, the more tentacles it used to attack and ended up being sucked into Logan's body, the more its body shrunk. Finally, Mark was done with the last sylph. Unfortunately, even with stronger sylphs, the chance of getting a crystal was not fixed. After absorbing the remaining infected sylphs, he only got 153 sylph energy crystals. Together with Aphelia, they watched the scene below. That was when Aphelia froze. Is something wrong? Mark asked as he sensed her emotions. Master, look at Logan. Mark then stared at the fat gluttonous giant, as Aphelia said. Logan was still ferociously eating while the enemy was panickily retaliating to no avail. However, Mark and Ophelia noticed that Logan's body was growing larger. Parts of his skin was changing color to an orange hue. The remaining clothes he had got ripped off by the sudden growth, and orange-colored armor started to cover his arms, legs, head, and lower body. Sure enough, Logan was mutating as it continued to eat the enemy. After a few minutes, and as Denia had met up with the two in the sky, Logan finished his transformation. Now, Logan was not eating through his mouth anymore. No, it was correct to say that not from his original mouth. It was because a humongous mouth with several dozens of rows of teeth grew on his stomach, chomping the enemy in large bites. Furthermore, there were holes in Logan's palms and other parts of his body that were sucking the enemy in as the holes made contact with the enemy. The struggle between Logan and the leader-type Alpha continued for 2 more hours. Unfortunately for the enemy, its body was immobile and had no way of escaping. Logan chomped onto its last bit and it finally died. Seeing that, it showed how hard it was to deal with the enemy if Logan did not mutate. It seemed that it was able to relocate its brain and organs and only died after its last bits were eaten. With its regeneration rate, it would be hard to kill with other means. Mark could have done it easily with miasma. However, the remains of the kingdom of sylphs would vanish in existence along with the enemy if he did it. Now that the enemy was gone, there was no use mulling over it. Thus, he asked Denia if it was possible to treasure hunt in the ruins while checking that nothing dangerous remained. Denia was a bit conflicted. Still, she relented. This place was already a lost cause if Mark was not here anyway. Surely, the sylphs would not mind. Day. Trade area, Stone Fortress, Eastern Mountain. A few hours before, a few minutes after Mark's departure, May and the rest prepared for the things they planned to do. Everyone would go to the trade area as they told Mark last night. The only exception was Felinia and Angus that Mark tasked to do something else. Chaflar and Giffer were also left behind. The dragon was too large to roam around the trade area, while Giffer would not move without Ophelia around. Everyone walked out of the fortress in their full battle gear. It was what Mark had suggested since they were not familiar with this place at all. Furthermore, not only demon races but a lot of elementals and spirits were known for being prone to mischiefs or even attack others. Not all demons were evil or wicked. The same goes for elementals and spirits. Not all of them were good-natured. The more noticeable fact, majority of these races were known for the evil deeds of their race. That was why, even though they just planned to roam around outside the stone fortress, they should not be too complacent about their surroundings. Sure enough, their presence would take the attention of almost everyone on the way. It was because humans were very unusual to see in this dimension in the first place. The fact that most of them were beautiful women added to the reasons while many races were looking at them. Of course, not only men were looking. Pephile, who was present within the group, was also getting the attention of the females on the way. The Tamawa were beautiful men, and among their race, Pephile's appearance could be said as top-notch. They made their way towards the northern part of the fortress. The group was being led by a duende that was assigned personally by the king. She was a servant who introduced herself as Marana. However, she did not look like a duende right now. She looked more like a human after she resized her body. Marana had this ability and was the reason she was chosen to lead them. It was inconvenient if a small duende was to lead their group, after all. Furthermore, this servant also did the reception to human-sized visitors of the fortress often. It did not take long for the group to reach the trade area. The place was brimming with creatures that wanted to trade. Probably, around a third of all the creatures that were currently residing here were present here at this moment. Everyone, please be careful. Even though this place is under our jurisdiction, security is still a huge problem. Please be wary of your surroundings. Marana warned everyone. Even though they had a few guards who also resized themselves to human size, it did not mean that nothing could happen. Especially since beautiful women of the human race were being targeted by evil individuals more often. Entering the trade area, even though there were a lot of people, there was still a good amount of space to pass through. Furthermore, their group was being the center of unwanted attention, and it made others create a path for them to go. Also, thanks to that, they were able to see what items were being traded around them. There were a lot of people, and of course, most of them were offering their items for barter. Some walked around with their items in hand, many sat down on their colorfully woven blankets, while others had their own stalls. Even the stalls varied in appearance associated with how varied the kinds of structures around the fortress. Of course, there was a large variety of items. To their dismay, many of the items were something they had never seen before. Everyone in May's group, with the exception of their guides and Pephile, was very interested. Unfortunately, they could not fathom what kind of items were being displayed almost everywhere. There was also the greatest obstacle, the language barrier. It was lucky that the Marana, Pephile, and Tarimaleo were here to provide them some translations. Even Tarimaleo's wives were having a hard time as they could not understand the words of the natives of this place. Among them, only the Pixie and the Karapakuru were able to travel into this dimension. However, both of them came from different parts of the world with a different language. As for the others, they were born and grew in the mortal world. Their knowledge of the language was too shallow. Browsing through the stores, they saw a lot of interesting stuff. From weapons made of strange materials to beautiful gemstones that looked mesmerizing, there were too many things to see. The things that took their attention the most, however, were the magical items. These items were kind of rare and were very expensive. One they saw was a spear with a body made of black wood and a blade made of red-colored metal. The owner demonstrated it to attract people and fed the spear with magical energy. Its blade glowed like magma and was able to pierce a plate of metal easily due to its temperature. Unfortunately, the spear was being traded for a large amount of meat. The man, who was an encantado in a human-like form, seemed to need a large amount of meat because of his baguettes. The appearance of the man surprised them and thought that he was a human. However, encantados were spirits that were able to take different forms. That was what Marana told them. As for the baguettes, they were animals that supernatural beings rear. They had the appearance of different harmless animals. However, they transform and become dangerous when their master was harmed. For sure, this encantado was raising his baguettes for protection. That was what they needed the most at these times. And a large amount of food was needed to raise them. Seeing the spear, May was a bit interested. However, thinking about it further, her interest declined. Mark could make them more effective weapons. Even though it was magical, a weapon like this spear was unnecessary for them. As they left, they did not notice the dejected expression of the encantado. He saw May, Colleen, and Alana. After all, just having beauties watching you was already satisfying. Seeing them go away as they lost interest was a huge blow. They continued to roam around. May was satisfied looking from afar while commenting on the things the little girls were pointing to. Colleen and Alana were also reserved, but they took the initiative to look at the wares being traded closely. Edsel, Pearl, and Spera just stuck behind May as it was their duty. As for Tarimaleo and his wives, they were more active as Tarimaleo wanted to look for gifts he would give to them, especially for Felinia, who was not here. Only Amihan and Pephile kept their eyes on everyone, making sure that nothing would happen. While walking, Spera felt something. "Mistress," Spera called for May. "What is it?" "I sense something from that man sitting there." Spera pointed at an old man sitting under a tree with his wares placed on a ragged cloth in front of him. "Do you know what you are sensing?" May asked. "I don't know." Spera shook her head. "I only know that I feel somewhat attracted to it." "Let's see it then," May suggested. Spera nodded. She did not know what it was. However, she felt somewhat eager to see it. Leaving the others that were still browsing on the nearby stalls, May and Spera took the little girls towards the old man. Pephile and Amihan nodded at each other, and the latter flew towards May. Edsel and Pearl wanted to follow but got separated because of the number of people. They arrived in front of the old man who was just sitting there with his eyes closed. Unlike others that were advertising their wares, the old man sat there silently, letting people browse his wares without disturbance. Nevertheless, The old man opened one of his eyes as May's group was about to browse the items he had on display. It was obvious from his eyes that he was quite surprised by them. Not because of their appearance, but because of what they had. The body of void, with an unshackled soul. A space attribute soul. A girl with transferred memories. A girl with blood from another world. A child of unknown existence. And a sleeping deity. What a blessed lineup this was. The old man said with a gentle smile. Hearing those words, May retreated in high alert, making everyone halt their movements. Seeing May's glare at the old man, they became ready to fight. They could not fathom why, though. Although they heard the old man, they could not understand what he had said even if he spoke in human language. For May, however, even if she could not properly understand the rest, just hearing the term, body of void, was enough to trigger her. She looked around. It might be bad if others heard what the old man had said. Unexpectedly, everyone else was minding their business. It even looked like that they could not see May and the others that were already ready to attack. Seeing May reacting like that, the old man shrugged as he opened both his eyes. Worry not, young ones. I have no intention to fight, and do not bother with the others, only you six could hear what I had said. The man's voice was heard. However, the old man was not opening his mouth. His voice was being directly transmitted to their heads. Even his intent was also being felt by the six. His gentle soothing voice could not help but made them calm down for some reason. May knew that the old man was not lying. If the soothing feeling was just a mental attack, her body would reject it. However, it did not happen. She could only lower her weapon. Who are you? May asked with a frown. Me? The old man dressed in rags pointed at himself. I'm just an old nobody trading for wares here. I don't believe that, May replied with a pressing tone. To her words, the old man just replied with a sigh. You don't have to believe me, but you can look at my items if you want. What do you mean by the things you called us before? Spera asked. Things I called you? What things? This old man doesn't remember. If you are here to trade, please look at my items. If not, please don't block my business. The old man then returned to his nonchalant state as he stopped talking and closed his eyes. May and Spera could only look at each other. Emihan scratched her head in confusion. The little girls could not fathom what was happening at all. And thus, they sat down to see the items being displayed on the dirty rag spread out on the ground. Mistress, this is what I'm sensing. Spera pointed at the black gemstone. Old mister, what is this? May asked. Then, the old man replied, directly into their heads. It is a gemstone that had a small space inside. Come on, hold it, and try to transfer magical energy to it. Hearing that, Spera slowly reached to the gemstone and looked at the old man. Seeing him nod, Spera did what she was told to do. As she injected her magical energy into the gemstone, she felt a small space inside it that she could open at will. She was shocked. Spera then handed the stone to May, and she also tried it. Her expression was not different than Spera. In their estimate, the stone had a 2 meter by 2 meter cube of space inside just a pinky fingernail-sized gemstone. What do you want to trade for this? May asked. Then, the old man replied. What do you want to trade for it? Hearing that, May exhaled and took a small pouch out. Do you accept this? May took one of the contents of the pouch and showed it to the old man. The old man opened one of his eyes, just become shocked once more. It was an energy crystal. Mark had given all he collected yesterday to May and tried to trade items with it. 10, no, just 5 of those for the gemstone. I have 2 more here. May and Spera were surprised. Where did the calm and mysterious old man go? Nevertheless, it was to their favor. They traded 15 energy crystals for the black gemstones. Furthermore, the old man also offered more of his rare wares that were all magical items. May, Spera, and Emihan were happy at their harvest. They could tell that the old man was not swindling them, as he seemed really desperate for the crystals. He even explained and demonstrated the use of the items he offered. When they turned their backs from the old man, however, Marana and Pephile rushed towards them. "Where did you all go?" Pephile asked them with quite a panicked expression. "What do you mean?" May was confused as Spera and Emihan. Emihan then replied as she pointed behind them. "What are you asking us? We just traded with that old ma." Emihan was not able to finish her words. There was no old man at the place she was pointing at. His wares were nowhere to be seen either. The only proof of the old man's existence was the items May and Spera had in their arms. Day. Trade area, Stone Fortress, Eastern Mountain. Because of Pephile's outburst, they decided to go on an area clear of people to talk. There, May, Spera, and Emihan learned the reason. Things were still all fine when everyone separated at first, since the places where everyone had gone to were in the close vicinity. Colleen and Alana were looking at ethnic-looking accessories in one stall, and others could do the same without trouble. However, when May and those that came with her went to a place that did not have a stall or trader at all. More than that, some sort of power seemed to be at hand as Edsel and Pearl got separated from them for some unknown reason. When the way was cleared out, the two could not find May and the others they were trying to follow. Pephile also lost sight of them, even though he was keeping his eyes at everyone. Furthermore, aside from May and the others missing, he did not feel anything strange. As if everything remained natural, and it was too natural that it was suspicious. May, Emihan, and Spera felt their backs cold. No wonder Pephile seemed panicked. They suddenly vanished from their sight, with no sign at all. It was strange, though, as they were staying in one place all this time. Furthermore, they could see all of the other people in the trade area passing by. "Now that we mentioned it, it's really unusual," May said with a solemn expression. "What is it, mistress?" Spera asked. "Remember, when we are talking to the old man, the other people are not paying attention to us even though we garner their attention wherever we go. Like now," May said as she glanced at the spirit races passing by that were looking at them. "That's true, isn't it?" "Yeah," both Spera and Emihan agreed. The strangest thing, none was able to sense anything unusual in the way they disappeared and reappeared. As Pephile had said, everything felt too natural to the point of being suspicious. Seeing the three discussing things, Pephile looked exasperated. "Sir Pephile, you should calm down." Marana tried to appease him. "We will investigate what had happened just now. I suggest that everyone should return early and stay inside the fortress until things are affirmed." "Ha." Pephile sighed. "All right, we should return." "Pephile, you should really calm down." Colleen followed up. "Something might have happened, but everyone is okay in the end." Not only Colleen, but others also felt the same. May, Spera, and Emihan also did not feel any danger from that old man. Furthermore, the old man traded good stuff to them. May knew that Mark would be happy to see these things when he returned. And because of this, instead of calming down, Pephile became even more exasperated. "All right. We're lucky that nothing really happened to them. If something did, we can start counting down about how long this place will last. Don't you get what I mean? Damn it." Hearing those words made Marana and the guards frown. Counting down on how long their fortress would last? That should be a joke. However, that was the only word that Colleen could reply with. Not only her, almost everyone in their group, even the little girls, had realized the severity of the situation. Those reactions made Marana and the guards feel like Pephile was not joking at all. Still, from their beliefs, this fortress was impenetrable. Thus, they could not fathom why this group felt that this place would not last long at all. With those emotions, they finally decided to leave the trade area and return. This place would still be here tomorrow, after all. They could visit it again tomorrow with Mark. Also, the situation that happened just now would surely reach Mark. May would tell him. It was the same for Emihan and Pephile. The existence of the old man would surely interest him. But still, just who was that old man? That question came over and over in their minds, but none of them could not find any answer. As they returned, They passed through the same area where they saw the old man and saw nothing. Asterisk 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 unbeknownst to them, the old man saw them pass by. After all, he never left in the place. He was sitting there, waiting. Waiting for those interesting people with the destiny to see him. Nevertheless, there were times that they would find him because they were not bound to the destiny of this plane at all. While seeing their backs, the old man noticed something and smiled. I wonder if they will be able to get over this new trial. The old man sighed. It was true that not everyone was good, and now, those blessed girls would face an annoying impediment. Asterisk 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 everyone walked towards the fortress and walked at the path beside a moat near the walls. All of them were quite absent-minded because of what had happened. Mirana and the guards were the same as they tried to think of what could cause the fall of their fortress if May and the others were harmed. But then, is it just me, or we are taking too long? May suddenly voiced out. None of them noticed. They already traversed a distance more than twice than what they should have to return to the gates of the fortress. May's question snapped everyone out. It was as if everyone was in a trance. This made her frown. She looked to the direction that they were going and then, behind. Both ways looked the same. Are we lost? Pearl voiced out as she saw the same thing as May when looking around. Everyone was the same. They looked shocked while scanning the surroundings in high alert. Without a doubt, they all entered some sort of trance that disabled them from sensing their surroundings and impede their sense of direction. The situation was a dangerous one. Everyone immediately gathered around with their backs facing another's. The guards also surrounded everyone to ensure their protection. Should we wear our clothes inside out? Colleen suggested. It was not hard to tell what was happening. If not that they accidentally entered a place under a Tikbalang's magic, a Takabalong must be targeting them on purpose. Moreover, whoever did this, it was a powerful one. None of them felt anything after all until May spoke. However, taking off their clothes, especially that the majority of them were females, seemed inappropriate. It's fine, we don't have to, May replied with a serious expression. She then smiled. A mesmerizingly smile. Even though that smile told that whatever or whoever the enemy was, this illusion was nothing. Crimson. May called out. Black smoke gathered on her right shoulder which formed the reddish-black-colored Bloodchild, and with his jiggle, the very same black smoke scattered in the surroundings. Mirana and the guards felt terrified. They were not new to this black smoke and knew the feeling of miasma when it was close. Then, the surroundings started to distort. The infinite loop of the moat and the wall vanished, and they became surrounded by trees, bushes, grass, and vines. The black smoke then gathered once more. May patted Crimson and thanked him before the Bloodchild vanished once more. Mirana wanted to question what that creature was. However, their current situation took precedence. She scanned the surroundings and spoke. We should be in the forest, east of the trade area. This is the only part of the forest surrounding the fortress where these vines grow. It seemed like even though the scene they saw was an illusion, it was true that they walked quite a long way. Just when Mirana finished her sentence, Pephile shouted, "Whoever you are, come out." That shout from Pephile was replied by a dozen of rustling sounds coming from different directions. Tall silhouettes came out from behind trees, vines, and thickets after some distortions in the surroundings. Having the head of a horse, muscular body of a man, and an elongated pair of legs with hooves instead feet, there was no doubt. It was a group of Tikbalangs. Mirana then noticed the markings on the bodies of these Tikbalangs. So, it's these brigands. Know them? Pephile asked her. They are a tribe of wandering Tikbalangs. They are known to target women of any race and copulate with them. After new members of their tribes are born, they kill the women and move somewhere else. But that's not the problem here. Then, the problem is, I'm sure you noticed that the representative of the Tikbalangs and Ongates was a single person. The representatives for multiple tribes of the same race are chosen as to who was the strongest. Among the Tikbalangs, the leader of this tribe is the strongest. but his notoriety devoid him of access to the fortress, making the strongest of the Ongates to take over. Hearing that, Pephile did not ask anything anymore. That surely was a problem. They were talking about the strongest of the Tikbalangs in the area, after all. Finished talking. A Tikbalang with red mane and fur walked up front with an arrogant expression. Narciso. Mirana recognized the Tikbalang. Without a doubt, he is the one she was talking about. Good that you recognize me. It will be easy then. Narciso said with a smug expression of a horse. The women should just surrender. We'll let the children and men go. Also you too, female duende and female sylph, we don't need you too, go away. It is better for you not to touch them. Mirana threatened. They are under our protection. Diwata Danaya will punish you all when she returns. Hey, fret not. Although it is such a waste for such beautiful women, we'll return them later. With our offsprings, that is. Nay. Nay. The laughs of these Tikbalangs echoed in a way irritating to the ears. Mirana. May spoke calmly, which for some reason, made the aide feel unsettled. There's no problem to eliminate these trash, is there? Gulping her saliva, Mirana replied. It's fine. Although it is preferable if we can just take 3 golden hairs on their manes to tame them. Even if their personality is unwelcomed, they are still strong and can become assets to battle. I see. Maybe, Gerger will want one too. May said in a way that made both duendes and Tikbalangs stare agape. The way she spoke made it as if the Tikbalangs were easy pickings. Not to mention that even the weakest Tikbalang, at a young age, could run up a tall mountain in a few minutes. Even their kicks would be able to take down a Seringue, that had a very large body. Nay. You all hear that? This female human wants to capture us. We haven't started yet, and she is already dreaming. Nay. Another set of annoying laughter ensued. Annoying. May spoke with a fierce glare. With that word, her body disappeared from her initial position, with a bit of flashing light. Then, with the shock of the duendes, the laughter of the Tikbalangs came to a deafening halt. They all froze on their positions with their eyes wide as if they had seen something too terrifying to fathom. May then walked out from behind Narciso, making Mirana and the duendes look back where she initially stood, and to where she was now in soul-shaking shock. Kneel. May then said, which made all 12 Tikbalangs feel something heavy pulling them to the ground. All of them, except for Narciso, immediately fell to the ground on their knees. You. Narciso resisted as much as he could, however, his body would surely not last. I said, kneel? May spoke with a glare. Bam! A heavier force fell on Narciso's body, slamming his whole body to the ground. Damn it! Narciso was still trying to resist. It was just futile resistance, though. What happened? Mirana and the guards are in utter confusion. Because Mama is strong. Miracle was the one replied, accompanied with the shrug of everyone in their group. May then showed the 36 strands of golden hair in her hand. She used all her abilities as both an evolver and a psychic to gather all of these in a short moment. After all, what was faster? The Tikbalangs who could run fast, or her who could instantly appear behind them? Unfortunately for the brigands, the way they surrounded her group made them all enter the distance she could use her force blink. It could have been a different thing if even just one of them were far away. With the enemies dealt with magnificently, they returned to the stone fortress, now, without any hindrance. Along the way, everyone turned to them like before, but with a different reason. Before, because it was a group filled with beautiful women. Now, because there were a dozen Tikbalangs, chained, and was following behind them like slaves. Day. Secret room, stone fortress, Eastern Mountain. Inside the stone fortress, several small hidden passages connected the throne room, meeting room, the room of knowledge, and the armory. These passages were hard to see as the entrances were not only small to fit a duende but were concealed with various layers of protection. At the end of these passages, a hidden room could be found. It was a place that only the royals of the duendes in the Eastern Mountain, and their close and trusted aides knew. Right now, there were 4 people inside the hidden room. the Rey and Reina of Eastern Mountain, Marana, and the General Mario. Marana, who had just arrived back here in the fortress, had to report to the king and queen about what had happened. She did not accompany May and the others just to assist as a guide. The royal aide was there to observe the members of their group individually. Furthermore, she was not just an aide, by role, she was a person trained to fight and protect the queen when necessary. She was a calm person and serious about her work. Even during the time they were surrounded by the Tikbalangs, she was not totally startled and still took the chance to observe everyone closer. Her report was not really that urgent and was scheduled during nightfall. However, the situation when the group returned made the king call her to report. After all, everyone in the stone fortress witnessed the guards dragging the captured Tikbalangs. It would not be surprising if they were just some regular Tikbalangs. However, it became a huge issue when the captured ones were known to be the strongest and most unruly of the Tikbalang tribes that gathered around the fortress. That was something that not even the whole fortress working together would be able to do at all. And more than that, all 3 golden hairs were taken away from the mane of each Tikbalangs. While this would not grant the capturer their loyalty, it guaranteed their absolute obedience. The king needed to address the situation. Of course, they would not make May return the golden hair strands from the Tikbalangs. However, he needed to know what really had happened. Marana reported everything from the start. She told the details from when they went out of the stone fortress, the time they browsed the items on stalls in the trade area, the attention they gathered as they walked around, May and the others' disappearance, and lastly, when they encountered the brigands. The whole report sounded fine and normal, except for the 2 last parts. May and the others vanishing in the way Marana described was quite astonishing. While they heard of some individuals stealing in the trade area as the security was quite lax, something like this was never heard before. And lastly, the situation with the brigands. The goals of these brigands were not surprising. May and the others looked above average. Furthermore, May even had the beauty that could be compared with the Dewatas. It was hard not to expect to see some of the races with lustful tendencies to come after her. This was one thing the king worried about when he sent guards to be with them. In fact, the number of guards around May's group at that time was more than the number that was guarding the safety of the whole trade area. This was the particular reason no one in the trade area tried to mess with their group despite the great number of people there. However, it seemed that the worry was unnecessary. Hearing how May dealt with the Tikbalangs in a blink of an eye, the king managed to feel relieved about Mark volunteering to deal with the threat in the kingdom of sylphs. The wife was strong and talented, what more of the husband? Furthermore, according to Marana's observation, their whole group was ready to fight rather than flee during the time they were surrounded. Even the little girls was not an exception. Furthermore, there was also that blob of reddish-black slime that appeared out of nowhere and released miasma to cancel the illusion of the Tikbalangs. In my assessment, this group of humans is not to be looked down upon. Marana gave her thought. Even though some of them are blood demons, as their leader claimed, the abilities they have shown so far are not among what they should have as people belonging to that race. Furthermore, we have yet to see what the other members could do aside from Miss May, Miss Amihan, and Miss Aphelia. This meant that they can be best as allies and the worst as enemies. There are a lot of unknown factors to them, but it did not matter as long as they are on our side. King Hiramano surmised. Yes, my Rey, Marana affirmed. How about you, my dear wife? The king of Duendes turned to his queen. Did our unfilial daughter told you anything? Those words, however, caused the king to receive a heavy glare from the queen. I already told you multiple times to stop calling our daughter that. Continue, and you will also lose a wife. Queen Malabinia said with a serious expression. She was not joking at all, which made Hiramano reconsider his thoughts. Still, he could not get over the fact that Felinia left the kingdom and eloped with that womanizer. The king had great plans for his daughter. Tying her knots with the current general that was loyal to the throne and was hounding achievements was already good. However, she fell in love with someone else. It could have been fine if the person was someone from their kingdom. However, Terimalio was not. The worst thing was that Terimelio was a ninth prince of the kingdom of the Black Duendes to the south. Although their race was not totally evil, they were known for their wicked tendencies. As for the Duendes of the Stone Fortress, they were not total enemies with the Black Duendes. In colors, they were categorized as the Brown Duendes, that specialized with earth magic. Even if that was the case, the Brown Duendes did not like the black ones like how they were hated by the White Duendes. Hiramano sighed. Seeing that, Malabinia reminded the king. Remember that Terimelio saved your daughter from harm. Without him, we won't even have her anymore. You kept pushing her to the point of leaving. Don't ever think that I have already forgiven you for that. Those words did not only struck Hiramano but also Mario, who was in front of them. He was the supposed husband of Felinia before until Terimelio appeared out of nowhere. Thinking about the queen said, his hate for Terimelio lowered a bit. He was just overwhelmed to see them together for the first time after dozens of years. I apologize. The king sighed. I mean it, although I can't say that I will accept that bastard. That is fine enough. The queen seemed to be satisfied with how dismayed the king looked. Then, did our daughter say anything? Hiramano went back to the topic. There is. Malabinia nodded. Currently, Terimelio formed a tribe of different races and had other wives besides our daughter. That bastard. The king made an outburst and stood up. Shut up. The queen glared fiercely. Hiramano fell silent and slowly sat down. I'll continue, Malabinia said. Their tribe right now is working with humans for safety. Remember what had happened when the king of Sylphs sent people to investigate what is happening in the mortal world. It seemed that it has affected spirit and elemental races in there, losing some of their abilities, primarily, making themselves invisible to the eyes of mortals or being able to enter their home trees. That is why our daughter is with these humans. Is that so? The king caressed his beard. Their leader did not mention anything about that. No one asked him, Malabinia said. He only gave us what we want to know about the cause of this catastrophe and the state of the mortal world. He probably did not know about the scouts they sent, and no one asked him about the races in the mortal world. That is. I guess you're right. The king agreed. What else? The place they currently reside has many people with strange abilities. Although most of them seem to be physical, there are those with magical and psychic abilities. The people in this group, apparently, they are the strongest among them. I see. The king nodded. Then, we could assume that we will get good news about that thing in the kingdom of Sylphs. The chances are high if we look at the current evidence, Myre. Mario agreed. And also one more thing. The queen added. Felinia mentioned about their leader being able to gather pure energy into crystals. She said that he uses those crystals to increase the strength of the Sylphs directly under him. It would justify how strong that Amihan is. That's. Not only the king, even Mario and Marana was stumped after hearing that. No, wait. Marana realized something. What is wrong, Marana? The king asked. I just remembered that when Miss May and the others vanished, I said that she returned with some rare things that they traded with a mysterious old man. Thinking about it, they should have nothing to trade with that would interest any of us. Unless they actually traded those crystals. Those words caused the other three to ponder. That was very likely. Should we try to trade for some of those crystals? The king suggested. Myre, Mario replied. It is better that we confirm it first before we do some movements. They might not take it positively. If that happened, it will be bad for our relations with them. That is also true. The king nodded. Then, we will do this. We will wait for the return of their leader, and I will personally talk to him about it. Felinia might not lie to us, but I still want to see those crystals and assess its worth. Just in case. The king turned to his queen and his aide. Prepare some of our treasures for exchange. Choose some that might take the interests of humans. Yes, my dear. Yes, Myre. Malabinia and Marana replied respectively. Then, the king turned to Mario. Also check for the slaves. Marana mentioned about Miss May speaking about their leader wanting to tame or having slaves. Yes, Myre. Mario replied. The meeting continued and unfortunately, they were not able to come up with anything to do with the brigands. Thus, they decided to ask the representative of Ongates and Tikbalangs later on. She should know what to do since the brigands belonged to their race. Asterisk 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 the long day had passed and sunset was about to come. At this time, silhouettes appeared from the mountain to the west. The sentries immediately reported to the king as they saw Diwata Danaya and Mark returning. However, they could not see the fat giant anywhere, and instead, there was an orange-armored giant with them carrying a large box made of metal on his back. The news immediately spread in the whole fortress. After all, many anticipated the outcome of this. The greatest threat they were facing now was the drought caused by that water-absorbing carpet of pulsating flesh. Thus, their return was faced with more people. They were led by the king and queen of the stone fortress, together with the representatives of the races. Lastly, May and everyone were also present. Danaya and Mark emerged from the illusion-covered forest and saw the commotion. Mark could only sigh and turn to the tired-looking Danaya. "It's your duty now," he said as he led Ophelia and Logan towards May and the others. The others were confused about his conduct, and leaving Diwata Danaya, who was looking a bit ragged, to face everyone. Danaya bitterly composed herself. In front of everyone, she said the news. Everyone. She smiled. The threat in the kingdom of sylphs is no more. We can now stay in this place with less worries. The news caused a commotion in a very positive way. The king and queen Fo, the duendes and the other representatives could not wait to hear the details. Of course, they approached her positively and respectively. Everyone was happy, and the situation was like a festival that night. A small occasion was opened, and everyone had a share of good food that they never had for weeks. Well, that was fine for everyone, except the brigands that faced the glare of the Reaper, and the representatives of the Ongates, Amayana, begging not to kill them, as they could serve better purpose alive than just a pile of corpses.